Welcome to the Five Phenomenon Podcast. I am your host, Shane Hazen. Coming up this week, writer-director Tyler Savage. His new movie, Blinders, is playing the Austin Film Festival in 2 weeks, I think. We'll have the exact date in the show notes. This is his second film. Fun fact, his first film had an editor by the name Shane Hazen. Me, yes, that's it. So you can imagine this conversation is a little familiar. I haven't done one of these openings in a while, and I feel bad just because I haven't. Normally, I'm watched something interesting during the week, and I've talked about this on a few other episodes, but I feel like my viewing habits in the pandemic have just kind of gone all over the place. At this point right now, all my days are so pre-planned and regimented. I've got it down to where every other day is I'm either watching a new movie one day, and then the next day I'll watch something that's familiar, kind of baby blanket-ish, if you will. So, like last night I watched Michael Clayton, which is just really one of my favorite movies of the last 20 years. And I plugged it into Letterboxd afterwards and realized I had watched it 8 times since it came out, or I've at least just logged it. I might have even watched it more. Most interesting movie I watched this week, I've been holding out on this, but the Russian film Leviathan, which when it first came out, had it highly recommended to me, and all I went on is the poster, and all I can say is the poster is very misleading, and the movie was more interesting than I was expecting. Would make sense, but it was very apropos of the time right now because it was there's one shot in an early scene that I feel defines the movie where they're in a mayor's office and a clear portrait of Vladimir Putin is in the background, and it just feels like his specter hangs over the entire movie. Very well made movie, as you might assume. I honestly don't have much to say about it. I haven't done one of these in a while, because for a reason apparently. So let's go ahead on to the interview with Tyler Savage.
How are you doing right now during the COVID season? How are you feeling?
I'm doing fine. I mean, I think I'm lucky to have a great girlfriend and a great dog and a great living situation. And so, I think it's been not as hard on me as it has been on some others. And my day job keeps me busy, so I'm still working. I work in that advertising sort of post production industry. So that keeps me busy and keeps me sane. So. I certainly hope that some sense of normalcy or hopefulness comes back when we get hopefulness. That's a hard word to remember right now, but comes back, in November.
It truly is. Yeah. So wait, how long has the movie been finished?
The movie's been finished since about, I think, February, March, somewhere in there. We did a big cast and crew, friends and family screening back in February, and that was sort of, right before COVID, and it was nice that we were all able to be together, for that at least, since we're not able to be together at these festivals. And then we had our world premiere at Fright Fest back at the end of August.
Where's Fright Fest at?
That's the Fright Fest UK, the main.
That was when you got a bunch of good reviews out of that, didn't you?
We got a lot of love out of that, and it was really nice. And it was nice because it was also like fans on Twitter were responding really well to it, as much as we were also getting some nice critic reviews. So we got like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes with 7 reviews right now out of the UK, which I'm very happy about. Mm-hmm. And that's where we'll take that into Austin, and then hopefully, build on that. And
that's why you distinguished the Austin Film Festival as your North American premiere, because it's not the world premiere, but you
well, and actually, yeah, exactly. And Fright Fest actually geo-locked that whole virtual festival, so nobody from the U.S. or North America could actually watch any of those movies. So, so really, none of the U.S. press has had access to it. So that'll be, kind of fun. And then, Yeah, we'll see what the reaction is, both locally and in a larger press sense too when we do it.
What from a filmmaker standpoint, what was an online film festival like? Like, okay.
I mean, it's like it's obviously disappointing, right? I mean, it's not ideal. I would have
What is the networking like at an online film festival?
seriously. I mean, I think AFF seems to be doing a good job kind of building out more networking inherently. They're doing like a lot of panels and a lot of things where, people are exchanging contact information and they're doing, I think, a more thorough job. But, with Fright Fest, Paul McAvoy, who is one of the organizers and founders of Fright Fest, he did like a little Q&A with me. And, I spoke to several of their team members. But then really it was just some of the filmmakers either reached out to me directly or I reached out to them directly, and we sort of exchanged films and exchanged private links. And that was fun because there was some networking there. Like we got nominated for best feature, best actor, and best and then we won best gore. I think we won the best gore moment. But it was fun because yeah, that was the only real networking was amongst fellow filmmakers, I would say.
Was there like a spreadsheet of email addresses?
I mean, sort of. I mean, it could reach out to a contact and be like, hey, you mind making an intro? But yeah, I had like 3 guys just reach out cold because they did exchange filmmaker email addresses. And that was sort of a nice thing. But obviously nothing beats, I'm talking to a former projectionist. Nothing beats being in a theater with people watching your movie and feeling their reaction. So I was disappointed, but at the same time, it was cool because Heidi and I woke up at like, 7:30 in the morning and the movie was playing, because it was Sunday, it was playing in the UK as an afternoon showing. And we were just able to search Blinders on Twitter and see all of these fan reactions coming in while it was playing. So that was pretty cool. It was fun to be able to see people responding to it.
But one of the film festivals I feel like even more so than South by Southwest that I'm familiar with is Austin Film Festival, because Austin Film Festival is just like an extremely open film festival. Basically, you don't have to spend any money as long as you're there in Austin when it's going on. And if you want to hang out at the Driscoll Hotel lobby bar, you're going to potentially, if you buy enough people drinks, you'll eventually be buying Shane Black drinks. Exactly. And like, you'll get into a lot of conversations. You get into a lot of conversations where it's like, hey, do you want to hear my pitch about my slasher movie about a mutant leper? You'll hear that. But you also get a lot of people who are just like, I want to expand the branch of the 3-act structure so it blows your mind. And all these people who really care about the art of screenwriting, because it's a heavily predominant screenwriter conference or festival. And the panels, I think, would translate well online. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I've got the full badge and plan to be very active on all those panels and join as many, partake in as many of them as I can. But again, to your point, there's nothing that, I would love to be buying people drinks at the Driscoll and chatting people up. That's where I want to be. But at the same time, I think you're right. Austin is a writer's community, and it nurtures that community. And I think that's why it feels like a really exciting launch for the film, because I do cherish and love screenwriting, and I do consider
you really do. You
fundamentally a writer, and that's why it's a cool community to be part of. Whether we get to physically be there this year or not, I hope to be there again in the future.
That's why I was so excited about you guys in such a high post at this film festival, because it is such a screenwriters festival, So.
Yeah, and they, when you don't have a lot of, star power or something necessarily in your movie, it's nice to be recognized for what the underlying, structure of the story is, and have that be the thing that's sort of the centerpiece of it.
Okay. So let's get back to Blinders later, but let's just go ahead, rewind back. Let's do some basic Wikipedia stuff. Where are you from?
I am born and raised San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles. I grew up in North Hollywood, and so was sort of around the business, growing up, but not in a super direct way. I had some like friends whose parents, maybe were a casting director or something. But yeah, I'm from Southern California and been in California my whole life. But I did, leave to go to college in New York, and then spent a few years in Austin where I met you and a bunch of other wonderful people.
I guess I knew that, but I for some reason I don't know if it's because of where you currently live that you were from south of the hills, not north of the hills. But what area of town was? What area of town was it in the valley?
It was like North Hollywood. So basically, it was sort of, like my mom did work in Burbank. My dad did work, kind of over the hill, more like, in Hollywood or Beverly Hills area. And then, yeah, but it was North Hollywood, which is great because it's not, P.T. Anderson's Deeper Valley part of the valley, but it is sort of
so porn came later.
Yes, exactly. We weren't in Torrance or like Reseda or Tarzana, though I did go to school, with a lot of those kids. So it was more. What's cool about North Hollywood, though, is it's where, the original Republic Studios was. It's where CBS still has a studio. It's still where Warner Brothers and Universal are based. So it was more of just the allure of being around all the backlots and the old Western facades and the small, the kind of, fake towns and everything that I think was the most appealing about it growing up.
So do you remember your first movie?
First movie ever saw?
Ever. Ever in a theater. You can give one, or you can give both.
Right. First ever in a theater. I have a really bizarrely early memory of seeing A Fish Called Wanda at my friend's house with it was a movie that I was obviously not supposed to see, but I remember, Kevin
You were
Kline.
old enough to be at a friend's house at that point.
I was old enough to, yeah. I mean, I'm sure by this point, I was probably like 6 or 7. I'm sure I saw a movie or was in a room with a movie before that, but I remember that as an early one. And I also do remember seeing Child's Play at my house when I was like 7 or 8. And it was like, my parents were amazing at doing things where it was like, yeah, we can let him watch that one. And then it was like, I remember just like hiding behind the couch midway through the movie. But yeah, I think those are two.
Well, what were your big theaters to check out that you went to?
Growing up in the Valley, it was all about City Walk. It was all about Universal City Walk. We would go there, we would, get dropped off by our parents there for like 8 hours, and you'd go just, run around, spend $15, whatever $15 you had, and then like go into the movies. And it was a 14 or 16 theater multiplex. So then you would be able to, try to, sneak in 2 or 3 other movies after the one that you paid for, which was always fun.
I think I haven't seen much. I can't remember if I've seen much of the City Walk. I remember seeing Avatar my second time there because it was like the only IMAX in LA at the time.
Yeah, I think that was the first big full official IMAX in LA, other than the one that's at the Science Center.
That's near the big Universal black box building, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So, what were the other big movies from your childhood then?
I mean, I think growing up, the weird thing is I got really into older movies, and I found comfort in like classic Hollywood kind of stuff. And it was really I guess it was just Turner Classic Movies and, runs to Blockbuster. I don't really know where I got access to a lot of those things, but, like literally like Public Enemy with Jimmy Cagney, or like, Little Caesar, and, or Key Largo, or these sort of like dark black and white movies. I like loved that shit growing up.
You were good going back to black and white films?
I loved it. I loved it. I don't know why. I think there was something very escapist about it to me or something. It was just so like another world that you could go into. But obviously I have super fond memories of the more obvious things, the Goonies or Home Alone, or things that were more marketed at me as a kid. But yeah, by the time I was 8 or 9, I was very much into older stuff. And I would obsessively watch like, old TV shows too. Like, I would be on like Nick at Night, or they had, what was the one? Remember they had Nick at Night and then they turned it into its own channel. What the hell was that called? TV Land. It was TV Land on whatever satellite. And those things, I don't know what it was. I think it's partially escapism. There was something about, maybe I felt a little bit out of step with my time period, so I liked looking at other time periods.
So wait, were you? I always remember Nick at Night and TV Land being comedy based. Were you watching episodic TV or the episodic drama, whatever they were putting out at the time then, and like figuring out the structure of like episode of the week stuff like that, and or because I mean those things are highly structured, and those are things that are pretty important to your writing too.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I don't know. I think you're totally, it's a very fair point. I mean, the vast majority of it's comedy. I remember a lot of like Green Acres and Laverne and Shirley and stuff like that.
Oh man,
Which is,
Green Acres, like I had my great aunt was my babysitter from when I was 3 till I went to school, and I just remember watching so much Green Acres and Beverly Hillbillies. Like, and it's so weird that I still have that database that I've never seen since then, but it's still
it's
Green
still
Acres.
in
We
there.
are there, you know.
Absolutely. And
That
like that
that
theme song goes on and you immediately fill in the rest. I honestly think though with like, where writing and structure became I had like at some point like when I was like 9 or 10, I got that AFI 100 movies of all time thing. And that really was a thing that I used when I first got interested to be like this is more interesting. I don't want to just be scattershot and pick a movie based off a cool title or a cool poster at Blockbuster, which is probably more of the path I was on before. And then I literally, in like a one spring break, went through like over 100 movies in like 2 weeks.
on the
And
list.
yeah, did the whole list. My mom had actually had hip surgery because she had this terrible thing. She had to have her hip replaced, and it was a huge, huge deal. So I would just like sit with her, and we would watch movies. Um, and that spring break where we just kind of binged the AFI 100 will always stick in my head as like the time I started really getting obsessed with it.
Jeez, like I think I'm still like I thought I was had a good percentage, and I think I'm still like 4 short of finishing a list. But it's funny because this list has recurred so many times for
Oh yeah.
it just it's not even necessary. It's close to our age limit, but like there's a good 10-year like this was a defining thing because I remember at the time like it was so poo-pooed as a crass thing or just like or the commercialism of a list that just doesn't reveal the breadth of all the nooks and crannies of film history and the personalities that made the art form what it is and yet it just like it was such an effective gateway for so many people apparently.
Exactly. I think that's exactly what it is. It was an effective gateway. I think any list is reductive. We are
Sure.
obsessed with lists. It's top 3 this, top 6 that, top 10 this.
The lists have only gotten better, so
Yeah, totally. And I bet the AFI has re-released that, but I'm sure 50 or 60 of those titles have sort of stood the test of time and been on there. But it's probably gotten a little bit more diverse and for good reasons since then.
So where does you mentioned a bunch of noir movies you were watching earlier? Like where do crime movies come into this? Like or where did you start reading stuff outside of being as a writer? What kind of books were you reading? What kind of lit were you and early writers were you into?
That's a great question. I think that really getting into, I would say that growing up, I was reading more, just like R.L. Stein and Goosebumps and those sorts of, monster mysteries and stuff. It wasn't
Sure.
probably until I was in junior high or high school that I started to become more, consciously focused on, reading, Sam Spade stories and kind of going back into some of the old Dashiell Hammett stuff and kind of studying that a little bit more.
You
But
were studying that in like did you got that into middle school or were you high school or
yeah, probably like 8th, 9th grade. Yeah, I think
wow.
that that's really where. And then I had a great creative writing teacher, this guy Glenn Hirschberg, who was a creative writing teacher at my high school, and he's actually I think published a book of short stories, and he got me into this. I remember he gave me this short story book by Joe R. Lansdale. It's called By Bizarre Hands, freshman year, and that's a
Jordan,
super dark book. And Joe R. Lansdale, now, yeah, he's got The Pale Door was just adapted, and I think he's had another one of his short stories adapted since then.
I forget what he's a big comic creator. If he created some big Vertigo title, I'm blanking. I wish
Yeah.
my frequent Ted co-host Ted Haycraft was here to correct me on this. But were you a Elmore Leonard kid?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that probably the movies got me into him initially, but I have several of his short story collections, and I actually just picked up a new one recently that was sort of, I think, released posthumously. That was a lot of his early work, which isn't as great as some of his, the stuff he's really known for. But yeah, I think all that, and then also, Tarantino was a big thing in terms of like when I first started getting obsessed with crime. It was like I saw Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, before I was 12, and I think that those are big things. And also, I was watching The Sopranos with my parents while it was first airing when I was like 10 or 11. And so what we would do a lot is like recreate that. It was Scorsese, Tarantino, David Chase with The Sopranos, and again, kind of having that basis in some of the older crime movies like Public Enemy or Little Caesar or Key Largo or whatever. I just was like, I am so in with all this shit. I just want to be steeped in all of these things.
I got a random question because it's funny you say watching Sopranos with your this would have been your mom.
Yeah, it was mostly my mom. I mean, my mom would be pretty good about letting me watch interesting stuff that was a little bit ahead of where I probably was at psychologically.
I remember you either told me or you posted on Instagram something about you've been going to the LA Philharmonics season for like consistently for how long is it? Like you've been going since you were a kid or something like that.
Yeah, my mom is a major lover of classical music and has been, part of that LA Philharmonic community for a long time. She like sponsored an event that they did one time, and she, just loves going to the classical shows at the Hollywood Bowl or downtown at the Disney Music Hall. So we went back in January to an event that was really just lovely. It was with Yo-Yo Ma and one other musician. It was just sort of a private event. But yeah, so I think that classical music has always been, part of my life. And she, I give credit to both of my parents for helping, get me a little culture early on.
I have a massive inferiority complex to you kids born in California, much less anyone who has any parents with culture. It's just like, come on, man. You're like born on third base in this regard. What the hell?
Oh, whatever. You have more of an encyclopedic knowledge of writing and film and so many, and it's certainly graphic novels and comics than anybody I know who was born out here. So I think it's honestly whatever
fair,
information.
But the comics knowledge gives you absolutely no credence, no value whatsoever. So was NYU like? Was that that a big thing? Were you fighting for it? Was that, I mean, NYU Film School was obviously a big deal at the time. Like it seems like it'd be a big coup to get in there at the time.
Yeah, no, that was huge. I mean, I went to NYU early decision, my application. I was totally set on being there. Part of that was just I wanted to get the hell out of, California. I had a conflicted relationship with LA. I thought LA was sort of phony.
Had you been in LA the entire time? No, I mean, had you like never lived anywhere else? Had you made any trips anywhere else? Lived with family anywhere else, or long trip like vacation anywhere?
We had gone because of both of my parents' work. I'd spent quite a bit of time in New York as a kid. I'd been there 5 or 6 times. We had some family in Connecticut, so I was there for holidays a few times and whatever. And yeah, so I don't know. I think that New York always stood out in my place. And then also, some girl I knew in high school went to NYU as an actor. And I was just like, well, that place is great. And I just kind of became fixated on it as like as a sophomore and junior. And, the best part about it is that, it got me to New York and it broadened my horizons in a way where I feel like a lot of the people I know, even if they did grow up in LA and it's a big city, if they didn't leave at any point, there is still a small town mentality that can exist here.
I heard recently David Mamet talking about his dad say that he was talking about New York, not in LA, but he said New York is the biggest small town there is.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's like
it would apply to LA too. Yeah,
totally. It's the same thing. It's like if you're just used to one thing, whether it's a city with 35,000 people or 14 million people, it's still the thing you're used to. And LA is like, I don't feel like I know certain parts of LA like they're my hometown at all. It's just like LA is so diverse and spread out that I think it's more like eight or 12 cities just that have been joined together. So you can definitely get that small town mentality here too.
Sure. I think, I'm trying to figure out where a lot of because when I was going to college, NYU had that reputation as if you wanted to be a filmmaker, you were going to go there. And I don't know if it was the Scorsese Spike Lee connection. But I always think of like there's Paul Thomas Anderson famously went there just for like a few days and left. And it's funny because I know he's anecdotally told two different stories about why he dropped out. One was that he got to a class and an instructor said, if you want to make Terminator 2, this is not the class for you. And he was like, I want to make Terminator 2. And he left. The other
The
other
David
story,
Mamet one's the one I know. Is that the way?
the David you know the David Mamet one? Do you want to tell that one?
Yeah, that's the one I've always heard, which I think is hilarious. Which it was for an early screenwriting class, and it was like a scene writing exercise about writing. Here's two characters, they both have this goal. Let's do this scene exercise, and he plagiarized a scene from one of David Mamet's early plays. It might have been Sexual
No,
Perversity in Chicago.
Hoffa. It was Hoffa.
It was Hoffa. Okay, it was from Hoffa, and he got an F on the.
It was a scene where was it Danny DeVito's in Hoffa, where he has to stay awake and he puts a cigarette in between his fingers and he lets it burn to his fingers to wake him up. And I remember hearing that story and being like, because also I remember that detail from things like Aliens. James Cameron used it. James Cameron used it in Aliens and in the special edition of Terminator 2. And I remember thinking like, you know what? I'm actually kind of with the instructor here because like that's just a gimmick. That's not a character detail.
Totally. Yeah, you never know. And I mean, I think some of those stories just get larger than life over the years. Who knows? But I do think, the one lesson from that I think the reason that people remember those stories is it's about people, staying true to who they are and not letting some sort of system change what their priorities are about the types of stories they want to tell or how they want to create content, and I feel like that's why people like us love those stories.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because I was thinking in the forms of like those things get so anecdotal and like print the legend and now you're on a podcast telling these stories, so how's it feel? so what was NYU like when you were there?
NYU was great. I mean, I think NYU was one of those things where it was sort of like you could really apply yourself as much or as little as you wanted. There was definitely like fellow classmates that I was surprised that they were at NYU or that they actually decided to go to film school because I didn't quite understand. There was just a level of obsession that I had that certainly other fellow classmates had or had more than me too. But it was interesting. And also I think it was the biggest thing for me that was my biggest takeaway is I had two great teacher relationships. And there's still teachers that I talk to this day. One was Ken Danziger, who's written a number of books on screenwriting, a really sharp guy. And the other one was a professor named Joan Horvath, who taught basically improvisational directing techniques. And I don't think there was any one class or one thing that I took from NYU, but those two individuals taught me a lot. And then I think NYU, I was able to go abroad because NYU has great study abroad program. So it was more just about being within that structure of that large private university. There was cool opportunities that came along with it.
Where'd you go abroad?
I studied abroad for 6 months in Dublin and 6 months in Prague. And so I basically was gone for all of my junior year of college, which was a lot of fun.
That's a very literary, very architecturally based study abroad, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Dublin program was specifically a screenwriting program, and it involved a lot of adjunct professors from Trinity College, and then the Prague one was more of just a general writing program, and I just wanted to be in Prague. But they do have a tremendous background of cinematography and love of cinema there, and there are some of those very notorious Eastern European studios. So it is definitely a culture steeped in cinema in a lot of ways too. So it was.
So, did you just do your undergrad there?
Yeah, I just did my undergrad there, and definitely never had the appetite to do anything beyond undergrad. If anything, I was ready to leave, I think, undergrad by the time that came around. But and then I ended up moving back to LA, and I got an internship working at Warner Brothers, and just to go from there. It was like Worked for a guy named Gianni Nunari, who was a producer on that movie, The 300, and that's where he basically made a lot of his money. And he was an interesting guy that was a pretty hard guy to work for. So when
did you get like some insight to the studio system that way, or because I mean, 300 would have been, I don't know what company he was a part of, but that would have been one of those like giant legendary things where like a giant company paid to like sell it to Warner Brothers or something like that. I don't know how much was it in the studio system really.
Well, 300 was so big that it cost about $38 million and it made about 450, I think. And it just like was the perfect studio model movie. And it kind of helped make this guy's career. But he also came from a background working he was an Italian filmmaker based out, he was originally from Rome. And so he had a lot of, it was interesting working with him, not only understanding the studio development world, but also understanding his history in the larger kind of foreign sales world and how this isn't just a North American market. So that was really educational. I worked my way up to becoming a story editor. So I basically worked for the head of development that they usually call like a creative director at the production company.
Okay. This would be the production company.
This was at the same place. It was called Hollywood Gang Productions. And, it was incredibly educational. I got to work directly with writers. I got to give feedback on scripts. We would go through sometimes 15, 16, 18 drafts of one script. And I would be the guy, not only providing feedback, but also gathering all the feedback from the executives and the producer and my boss to create a document that would generate the next draft for whichever writers we were working with. So it was cool. And also the way I always put it is I got to sit in the room with the producers and the executives after the writers gave their pitch and left the room, which that moment is super important, right? It's like the writer or the writing duo is in the room to give their pitch and then they leave the room and then you get the real reaction,
Okay, so the question begs, what kind of reactions were they giving? I don't know if you can give away. Okay, how much can you say what they're like? Was it like just incredulousness? Was it just like dismissiveness? Was it serious, ponderous? Oh, they really nailed that third act,
I'd say all the above except for the serious, ponderous one. It's probably the less thoughtful. I think that's what's frustrating about being a storyteller sometimes is the people that are in the positions of power a lot of the time don't necessarily have your love for craftsmanship or something that they can relate to it really. So they're kind of often shooting from the hip. Here's a guy who's an attorney and now he's become apparently a creative development expert for reasons I am not quite sure on, and it's only because he was on one movie that made money 7 years ago.
That's my question is like, do they like movies? Like, or is it just like, do they get into the movies because money's involved and they can tell people what to do or what? Like, and they kind of have cursory, like, I watch TV, so I like filmed entertainment stories, like mentality.
Right. I think film, if you're on the business side of the film industry, I think you've got a strong, appetite for, high risk endeavors. You've got a bit of a gambler's spirit. And also you like stuff that's flashy. I think a lot of, like Gianni, my former boss, he dated Nev Campbell. He just had a child. He's in his 60s and he just had a child 3 or 4 years ago with an Italian supermodel who's 25 years younger than him. So
do you still talk to him? Has he seen either your two movies?
No, I actually did run into him at like an event one time and we had a nice chat because it's like one of those things where there's tensions with people when you don't work for them or you're not under them anymore. You can have, as you and I can probably speak to that in different ways, but it's like, then you could actually have more of a good rapport because there's nothing that's charging the relationship anymore.
Okay. So how long were you there?
I was there for about 2 years.
What was the inciting, to use the writer's lingo, what was the inciting incident that led you to leave?
It was sort of a little bit of a time coming because I started as an intern, then became an assistant, and then promoted out to becoming a story editor. And so I was in a position where I had to fill my assistant role, right, in order for me to promote into this next role. And I had the damnedest time filling that position role because the assistant role, because 3 people quit in less than like 6 months. Because
So the job you had caused people to quit really fast,
yes,
basically.
yes. And some of them quit in a very, very loud way where they would literally be leaving the office screaming, fuck this, fuck you. You know, like it was as bad as contentious as it could get. So I have been kind of in the back of my head. I'm like, wow, I have a pretty high, you know, threshold for abuse. So I don't really mind. I don't really mind if people are harsh with me. But you know, these other people were really struggling with it. So I could see the writing on the wall. And then a friend of mine, uh, Nicholas Gonda, was working for Terrence Malick on a movie To the Wonder out in Oklahoma. And I had heard that they had just started pre-production. So I pinged him. I reached out to him. I texted him because I was friends with his younger brother. And I said, I will literally fly myself out there and work for free as long as you know, put me up and you know, give me food. And he was like, perfect. You know, and so I moved.
Okay, I mean, you very roundaboutly got to like our origin story, but so
Exactly.
wait, where did you and Nick meet? Nicholas Gonda. So where did you him and meet?
Yeah, Nick, I know because I grew up I went to high school with one of his younger brothers, Michael. And so I knew Nick from like hanging out at his parents' house back when I was, you know, 16 or 17. And then we weren't really, you know, particularly close before we worked together. And I think that it was really where our main relationship began.
So you go out to Bartlesville. How was the first few days there? What was that like?
Bartlesville was great. I mean, the Bartlesville was the best because it was like we took over that whole town, you know, in a great way where it was like, and it was me with, you know, Courtney Stevens and Deke Hadnot both picked me up at the airport, you know, and I remember the first time I met Terry, I walked into the Johnstone apartment building where we were all staying, and
Oh man.
I'm walking towards the elevator. As the elevator doors open, he comes off, and Courtney tries to introduce me to him because I'm going to be his PA, basically. And he was just like, "Oh, hi, lovely to meet you," and just immediately walked past, but made the first moment of eye contact. And I was like, "Okay, well, here we go." Um,
You
yeah.
know, I was only in Bartlesville for 2 weeks. I hung out. I wasn't going to edit on To the Wonder at all. And recently I had this friend, I had 2 actor friends who are shooting a movie in Connecticut right now. And one of them staying at a hotel, and they were just or I heard through my friends, the friend's husband describing the hotel, and all I could think of is my only set experience is Bartlesville and that hotel, and how magical and like weird and like I don't know, like summer campy it was. And I always just like to think that all film productions are like that, even like the expensive ones where like every night everyone, what was it? It was like, was it a retirement home turning into a hotel or a hotel turning into a retirement home?
I
And,
think
and they,
retirement home turning into a hotel. And
and
so they
they,
were basically
they would,
they were going to renovate. They were going to rip out the whole interior of the building the second we finished production. They were just going to gut the whole thing and rebuild every unit in there. So it was, yeah, man, you're right. It was summer camp is the way to describe it. And remember, you know, people would be drinking and smoking on the roof every night, and
the
you know, there
roof.
was like, oh, and remember that one bar, the one that was in the there was that building, the tower that had been designed by Frank Lloyd Wright.
I remember the tower, yeah, because it's in the
Everything
movie. Yeah, and
was,
there's a scene there. Yeah.
yeah, and everything was 3/4 scale in that building. So it wasn't full. Like the elevator was only like 5.5, 6 feet tall. And
See,
so
you're getting to this point where I know the images based on like
I
what
know,
you shot. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know these actual tactile physical descriptions of it.
But you're right. I'm just agreeing with you that there was a magical experience being in a small town, all of us living under the same roof, essentially. You know, where I don't know that I've ever going to have more fun on a production than that. That was like I would love to be able to recreate something like that as a
So
director in the future.
but to answer my question, movies aren't that fun typically, right?
No.
Okay. I mean, I would literally came in for 2 weeks, or no, it wasn't a week. It was like a weekend, and it was just like, wow, everyone seems so damn happy here, and it's that's not how movies are made. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, it was stressful, and always very high expectations from that group of creators, but it was so fun. I think everybody had a blast.
So you went to Austin after shoot and went straight on to post.
Yep, exactly. And that, yeah, I basically had, I went and told Nick Gonda and Sarah Green, well, they actually approached me and said, look, we're looking for a full-time assistant for, sort of a right-hand person for Terry. Do you have any, interest in that role? Because he really likes you as his PA. And so yeah, I told them that I did, and then I had to have a private, conversation with him about it. And I think he really liked that I had worked at a studio, because he knew that there was certain, you had to have a certain thick skin in order to hold one of those jobs for a long time. So I think he knew that. He said something like, I know that I won't scare you away too quickly or something, because you've already, kind of been through it. Whereas it is hard to be an assistant. You have to, let go of a lot of your own needs and say, I'm living this person's life, and what do they need? I remember even Spencer Bailey, who I think you might remember. He was Ben Affleck's assistant on To the Wonder.
I mean, we barely had any overlap, but yeah.
Yeah, and he's such a sweet guy. But I remember Spencer one time, he invited me to his room inside the Johnstone Apartments, and I walked in and it looked like a bomb had gone off. And he was Ben's assistant, and there was just papers everywhere and underwear hanging off the fan and stuff covering, clothes covering the TV. It was just like he'd thrown everything he owns around the room. And he looked at me and he said, "Don't comment. His life's perfect." And I was like, that's an assistant. That is a true assistant. Somebody that's like, don't worry about what my life looks like. His life is exactly how it's supposed to be, and that's what I'm here to do.
So you were on through all the post-production to The Wonder. You were on through the shoots for, were you all the way through Night of Cups and Song to Song shoots?
Yep. We did Voyage of Time, and then Night of Cups, and then Song to Song.
Do you want to take the giant swing to encapsulate all the things you learned under your tutelage of Terrence Malick?
Sure. I think that's always, and it's fun to talk to you about it too, but it really is fun to think back on now that there's like enough separation from it. I think that the big lesson, like honestly, we were talking about with that PTA story, and what is the underlying lesson of that NYU story of his, is it's sort of like, do your own thing and don't let people compromise your vision or what you are thinking about doing. Even though there was times when I fully disagreed with Terry and I felt like I didn't understand why he was making the decision he was making, he was so determined. He was so singular in his vision and in what he was trying to do that he didn't really care very much if somebody else wasn't on board with that. Exactly. It was, and I think that having that self-confidence or that sense of assuredness that I'm here to create the thing the way I imagine it, and not let circumstance get in your way, or let, decisions by committee don't work out very well typically. So unless you're in a corporate setting. So I think in a way that was fun. And also to see a man, who's in his 70s still doing it and still having the joy of it, because like, so much of that was like, here we are making a $15 to $20 million movie with Christian Bale, Natalie Portman, Cate Blanchett, and whomever else on set. And we're operating like an indie movie. We're almost operating like a film school movie, where we're kind of winging it and running from here to there. The location manager guy wants to kill himself because we're just illegally shooting in whatever place we want to. And I think that remembering that it's supposed to be fun, remembering that it's supposed to be a bit of a game, and it's something that should get you excited, even though the films don't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily call them fun as the single most defining characteristic. The making of them was joyful in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it does seem like everyone involved, like, I don't know, on the shoots always talked in terms of like, because even in post and in the worst times of it, you still had that sense, like this shared goal of like, we're trying to do something that goes back to why we all got into this in the first place. Like, and there's a lot of us, like, I always come back to like, we walked in every day with the idea you might come up with something that's going to change the art form today. And even if, realistically, no, you're not going to do that. you wanted, there was that atmosphere that was set up that allowed for that to potential to happen, and
Yeah.
there wouldn't be that openness that could happen. And
I totally agree, and that's a leap of faith to believe that something magical like that can happen. The whole radiant zigzag becoming thing of his. It's like he would get he would get
you're
sometimes ahead of himself in what he was trying to do, but he did indoctrinate us in this philosophy that you can do something purely original and you can change the form. You can do these highly aspirational things, and while yeah, not all of them pan out, the spirit of that is great. The
I,
attitude is great.
I want you to own the radiant zigzag becoming. Here's the thing. I remember the thing is like that's such a ubiquitous phrase in the Terrence Malick world. But I remember one time being at a film party, telling someone I worked for him, and someone repeating that phrase back to me. I was just like, "Where the hell did you hear this?" Because I didn't know it was out in the world.
I
So
didn't know it was either.
okay, I want you to own this, unless you want me to own this, because
I love it.
I am very cowardly forcing this onto you.
This was what was okay. So basically, I can't. Do you remember the book?
It was the introduction
Yeah, it
to
was the intro.
is one of the second novels after like Tristan Shandy. It was like it was a single person's name, but it was an introduction that talked about how the film structure or the book structure,
Yeah.
the narrative structure of the book was a mind of its own, and the way it presented itself, the phrase they used was the radiant zigzag becoming.
Yep. And that's what it was. And I can't remember. It was a female, the editor of the book. She was a professor of some kind. I'm trying to remember the author's name. But yeah, I think that idea, what was so funny about it is that Jack McNeice, Terry's long-term friend and, person he's known since he went to Harvard.
It's the novel Pamela by Samuel Richardson.
Samuel Richardson. Right. Exactly. So yes, this is from the foreword to the novel Pamela by Samuel Richardson.
We don't know the intro writer. We never quoted her specifically.
No, we gave the credit to him probably. But the whole point is, I don't know that he necessarily ever read the book, and I think the thing that was funny about it is
he probably read the book. He probably or some part of the book.
Maybe since, but I think what happened is he saw that phrase and it just fit an idea that he had in his mind, and he felt that it articulated that just in the just right way. And I think what it was, that was frustrating about it is sometimes we wanted to do these landed scenes in editorial, or we wanted to have these moments that felt, more controlled in some way. And he was always just pushing. Don't ever let it settle. It doesn't know what it is yet. It's always kind of unspooling and teaching us what it is as it's going. That was always the way I interpreted it, kind of.
Yeah, I think one of my lessons from being there was just like a lot of times our aspirations are contradictory, especially when you go back to what like, because one day you'll say, I want my actors to be Bresson-like and not move, and then another day you'll come in and be like, I want this scene to sing like opera. It's and it ends up going to end up being a balance of your aspirations, like, and hopefully when it works out well, they merge together organically. So, but
exactly, and then people are able to bring whatever meaning that they intuit, from it. To what you've presented them, because I think that that's the final piece of it.
So how long after you left one of my other favorite memories of you is and your work ethic and your writing work ethic was I distinctly remember we were on the sound mix stages on To the Wonder, and I went inside and all the seats were taken, and there was this cubby hole where you could like lay down in front of the console itself, and no one in the room could see what you were doing. So I would lay down and, maybe I'd be taking notes. Maybe I'd be my mind would be wandering, whatever. And I just remember you working on, you were doing your job so diligently, and you had all these balls bouncing. And then I'd look over and you were writing a script while doing all this.
That was the one where we were at the ranch, right? Where we were at Robert Rodriguez's place.
Yep.
Yeah, that place was awesome, and I loved that because it was Craig Berkey and
No, Craig wasn't out there.
wasn't it when we were doing the mix?
I thought
Remember,
Joel was.
it was just Joel. You're right. For that, it was just Joel. Yeah, who I ran into like a couple months ago. But anyway,
Joel Dougherty. Sorry,
Joel Dougherty.
We should say the name.
Yes,
Great sound mixer.
love that
Great
guy.
sound designer.
And
Genius.
so, yeah, I mean, basically, I always love multitasking, and I think that. I also knew that Terry was in a happy enough place when he was on the mix stage that I kind of had a free moment because I knew that he had Joel and he had the team and he had you and he had Keith and he had AJ, and nobody was really going to call on me necessarily, and I was paying enough attention. But those were long days. I mean, you're spending 8, 9, 10, 12 hours sometimes, and it was like, this is good time to utilize for something else.
I need to reiterate, you had all the balls juggled. Like you had everything under control. Like there was very little times like he was not unhappy with your performance. So like this, you were doing this and doing your job at the same time. I just remember thinking like there is a certain level of 4D chess multitasking that I can never accomplish.
I think that's what I mean about just learning to be an assistant. I think that my first job out of college did help me be ready for that job, where I was like, bring it on. There was a little bit of like a military like mentality, honestly, where I was like, I took pride in the job I was doing and I wasn't going to drop a ball, and I didn't get like emotional about it. I was just I was driven to make sure that I never disappointed him as well as that feeling.
Yeah, no, I think you did an amazing job at it too. Yeah, I mean, you were, yeah, like, so how long after you left were you working on, when you were writing these, was Inheritance the script you were writing at this time? Or, because I mean, the thing is, you have a lot of scripts in your library, or you have a lot of stuff you've been working on over the time. Was Inheritance the script you're working on?
No, Inheritance. No, it was a script that I think we ended up calling No Man's Land that I was working on with my writing partner Dash Hawkins. And he at the time was working as an assistant to a showrunner for a BEC show called Read Between the Lines, I think. But anyway, so he and I, it was good because we were both doing assistant jobs. And when you're working with a writing partner, I think, and you have a whole other career, a whole other job you're doing, it's nice to have somebody to sort of be bouncing things off with. So that was an action movie that we actually wrote that was called No Man's Land. And that was the script that ended up, we actually got management from that script. And that was part of the reason I ultimately ended up leaving Texas was we wrote an action movie that got us a manager. And so Dash and I both quit our jobs and decided to try to write full time.
Is it a thing where two assistants, like when one's stuck on a block of working, the other block is free for the other assistant?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's sort of like you fill in as you can. It was like
the hurry up and wait aspect to everything. Like someone's on a wait at some point.
Yeah, exactly. And it was funny. It was one time when we were shooting Night of Cups, where we shooting in Las Vegas. We shot in Las Vegas for 4 days, which was sort of a nightmare because to me, maximum Las Vegas time is 2 nights. And then you have to get the hell out of Las Vegas. Okay. It was just way too much. But anyway, Dash was there for what they called the BET Awards, where he was probably the only white person in attendance to the whole thing, and he was there for his boss because I think a show that they that he was an assistant on had been nominated. So he and I ended up having cocktails there in Vegas after I wrapped and after he got out of this event at like 4 a.m. because we were just working these insane hours, and in Las Vegas you can't even tell when the sun is up and when it's not. And it was just very funny that even when we were still in that assistant grinding mode, we were still able to find time to write and to get stuff out there.
I love this idea that you're just like walking out. Some of my significant Vegas memories involve like 4 a.m. and walking outside to the 3-foot high Long Island iced tea tubes, and like you'd walk outside and there'd be the sidewalks papered with stripper flyers.
Yeah.
And you guys are just like, But how, honestly, talk me through again. Break this scene again. Break me through this scene again. Who wants what?
Exactly. I mean, I think that when you are, and it was sort of like what you were talking about, with the AFF thing and what that community's like, when you're really passionate about this stuff, you could talk about it for forever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, even the distractions of Las Vegas can't get away from, can't pull you away from that. Like, we're working on something else now, and we're still very, very in sync about stuff. And it's cool that, that energy and that spark and that excitement hasn't gone away, even though we have had quite a few, professional disappointments, just like any person who's worked in a creative industry, and certainly just like any screenwriter.
Well, especially an industry that's so based on the market, and it's just like ends up being tenacity is the only thing that lets people survive. So,
Totally.
so wait, how long did it take for Inheritance to come up?
So Inheritance was sort of, I think I left Texas at the beginning of 2014, I think, or was it 2015? 2015.
2014 sounds right, because
It was like February, March of 2014. So it's been almost
right.
six and a half years now. So I think what happened is that I moved back to LA. Dash and I got management with a guy named Adam Kolbrenner at Madhouse Entertainment. And he took us out. We did the like water bottle tour thing where people read our spec scripts and thought they were awesome and then didn't buy them.
Wait, I didn't know you did a water bottle tour. I'm obsessed with this water bottle tour. Like, how extensive was it? Like,
it's pretty extensive. Like, I mean, talking like dozens and dozens of meetings. I mean, it was like, but it was also, beg the question, what are these people doing all day? Because I'm not really here to talk about it. I guess the idea is, hey, we're building out our network. We've met now. We had a cup of coffee together. Now you're part of my network. And next time I come across an action movie that needs a rewrite, maybe I'll tap you to do it or something. But it was sort of it was incredibly exciting at the beginning. We got signed by Madhouse Entertainment and then Verve Talent Agency. And, we went out with a spec script, this action script, and then we did a pilot. We met with the people that were the executive producers of Breaking Bad. We met with the two guys that were head of development for Cinemax. We were having like awesome meetings. But, it's really hard to get something to production.
Were they these meetings where they'd say like, yeah, we're totally in sync, and you'd feel this synergy, and then you'd get ghosted after that, stuff like that?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, you had to learn how to have a thick skin with those things where you're just like, I mean, but what's good about that is there's people that I probably met on a water bottle tour, 3-4 years ago that, if Blinders gets picked up and gets released next year, I can still hit them up and say, hey, look, I just got my movie released. What are you guys doing? It's like, I do think that there is some relevant networking that's available to writers through going through that process, but it's inevitably pretty tricky when, all of our aspirations, we want that big thing to happen. We want to get that movie into production. And so often, like you just said, it's just about patience and tenacity, because it's like, even some of the writers that, back at Warner Brothers, they were actually paid writers, and they were being paid on a studio contract to write this movie that was going to be a $75 million movie. How many of those movies got made? What, 5% of them? So even like when you're here, it's like the whole thing about climbing up the mountain. Every time you get to the peak, you're now in a point of view where you get to see the next peak. From the base of the hill, you just see this one peak. And then every time you get to that new plateau, there's always another peak that you got to hit. Guys that I envied their careers, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's in the Guild, and he gets hired all the time to do this rewrite work. And he like fully, his whole career is just writing. He doesn't have to have any side gigs. The man is 45 years old and he's never seen a movie go into production, or maybe one movie went into production and then it was panned because they rewrote the ending after he was, and it's like, even for the people that have made it, there's frustrations about what making it feels like.
The craziest is when you hear these writers talk and they just casually describe scenes they've written, and you could see like those scenes could, if not classic scenes, you would see like there's so much talent. Like I was listening to, I'm a big fanatic for the Movies That Made Me podcast, and co-host Josh Olson, actually he was describing a movie that did get made, but he was describing one of the first movies he made where these spies met in a porn shop, and he had this throwaway line where it was just like, yeah, no one's eyes will meet us here. And it was these two spies meeting in a porn shop in Europe. And I was like, that's such a great fucking line.
Yeah.
And no one's going to quote that line, but that's a great writer writing a great line. And it's just, I constantly lament the amount of writing talent in LA that works on shit that'll never be seen and stuff that goes to the dustbin of history. Just straight into the ether, this brilliance. But
yeah, and I think that is the frustration, and I think why there is sometimes a little bit of animosity to some people in those development positions, because sometimes it does feel a little bit like a fool's errand. You know, there's a lot of like production companies will go out and they'll talk to all their agency contacts and they'll say, well, we want 10 writers to submit a pitch to us that's about a fucking submarine with a monster on it. I don't care, whatever it is, you know, and then they just like, they're not paying you for that. They're just saying, hey, submit us a pitch. You know, Dash and I have done that countless times. And you're just throwing an alley-oop out there.
Let me ask you this. How much of development jobs are bullshit jobs for corporations taking over movie making? And just layers of administration to just make people commit to saying no, to not committing to large expenditure. And the fundamental idea that in show business is the business part still, like, especially, I wanted to say doesn't make sense, but it's so fucking short-sighted. Like, the stories that make us want to live are not things that everyone in humanity gets engaged with in a fucking weekend, you know?
Right.
It's not like
a four-quadrant blockbuster, something that's actually going to, you know, maybe be salient to a certain audience. I think that happens too a lot, where people broadcast as opposed to narrowcast something, and then they broaden it out so much that it doesn't really appeal to anybody anymore because they were trying to appeal. I think Disney gets into those waters a little bit with some of their development slate, where it's sort of like, well, who is this for? Like, who is this meant for?
Yeah.
But I agree with what you were just saying about the development thing. I think there is a lot of bureaucracy there. I think that a lot of people that come from, you know, I work in a more typical business setting. I think that there's a lot of people that come from other industries and look at this industry, and it does feel a little, you know, overstuffed. And it's like, do we really need all these people and all their assistants and all these things to make basically a decision about what 3 movies we're going to make this year? You know,
yeah, especially if they're making less movies. And that's the thing, like, the collective thing I found from people in the pandemic, especially when talking to people in LA, is like, we really need to rethink everything. We need to rethink the formula, because when you have a year where no one's seen anything in a theater, like, you just have to like stop and take stock. And there's it's just so much of this. The film business just doesn't make fucking sense sometimes.
It doesn't. I mean, I think that's where I look for the silver lining, because I think there's opportunity in chaos. And I think that there is a lot of overturn going on in the industry with, you know, with the streaming wars, but also, you know, where, you know, the approaches to finance and approaches to, you know, getting funding for content are multiplying there, because there's more and more need for it. So I do think there's going to be some silver lining, some good that comes out of this, this transition period we're in, because you're right. There is just a lot that's dysfunctional about the historical film model too, you know, and that's not just the Me Too's of it all, but just the acceptance of bad behavior in this industry is bullshit. There's so much fat on the bone. There's all these people that have, you know, some 4,000 square foot office and some $4,000 bottle of scotch that they drink with their directors. And it's like, what are you really doing here? Like, what is the job? Why are you, you know, what are you really contributing? And maybe we need to look at those roles in a different way.
I know lately I've been rethinking the whole director model in terms of, like, as a leadership strategy, the director model does not make sense. It's this sycophantic thing that like imbues power all the way up to the head, and more often than not does not benefit majority the production itself. Like, I don't know. We were talking earlier about Terry, and you mentioned the collaboration system not working, but for me, the last few years, I found that like collaboration with shared goals is actually the best thing to go for. It's always collaboration that is trying not to save its ass, not coming from a mindset of scarcity, and always trying to go for the lowest common denominator.
Amen.
That's the stuff you wanted to avoid. But like you look at shit like Marvel or Pixar, and they got flaws. Don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna say they don't, but you get a group of talented people, a group of talented storytellers together, and to say nothing about, which is a different podcast altogether, like the director formula for making powerful men more powerful, like goes to your point about the $4,000 square foot office or the $4,000 bottle of scotch. It's just like it's this self regurgitating thing that's like the model makes sense because it's what we've done before, but it's the only thing we've tried, you know?
And it's ego driven, right? I think that's a lot of like power grabbing kind of mentality there, where I think that it's like, what is it really in aid of? You know, a lot of times the best creation comes out of limitation, right? And so I think that that's where the model is sort of screwed up too. I don't think whether it's the director model or more of a producer model, I think that what you said that I said amen to is like actual collaboration around a shared goal is the greatest satisfaction. I don't want to be some dictatorial auteur that yells at people and tells them what to do. There's no joy in that. There's joy in working with somebody saying, I have this in my head. You're really talented at this. You're really talented at that. And then everybody comes up with something that's better than any one of us individually could have come up with. Like that's the whole fucking point of this. And I think that there's flaws. What was interesting is with the studio model that I observed, at least, I think the flaw was business decisions were trying to drive creative decisions. And
Yeah.
so that was too one-sided. And then what I saw on the Malick side is there were no business decisions at all factored into what was being created. And so it was like, I live in the gray area between. I would like to think that there's a way to maintain some sort of creative integrity while also doing something that does factor in the fact that we have to get this movie released to an audience that wants it at some level.
So you had the action spec go out? Was this like, was there after the Waddlebatter tour? Was this the thing where it's like you got to the peak and then you came down from back into the valley and you're just like, oh, this is amazing. I'm not making anything. Is that where you're like, I need to come up with as cheap a movie as I can? And
Yeah,
like,
that's where Inheritance came, because it was basically we got hired to write a adaptation and we got employed as writers. And so Dash and I both got into the guild because of that. And so that was tremendously exciting. I was like, oh wow, we're really, we're making tens of thousands of dollars as writers. And so that was cool. But then the movie fell apart after about 2 years, and we had done research trips. We had, put heart and soul into this thing. I mean, we had done 7 drafts. And so
can
when
you talk about this movie, or because I know the movie?
Yeah, I don't know if I
Okay.
can or can't.
Okay. No,
Yeah,
it's good.
yeah, I don't even know. But
Okay.
I will say what whatever, to the hell with it. The movie was to, killing yourself to death. Sorry,
The
Killing
Chuck
Yourself
Klosterman.
to Live by Chuck
The
Klosterman.
Chuck Klosterman. Yeah, it was a Chuck Klosterman book. I remember like,
And it was like
fucking Chuck Klosterman book.
it was so tremendously exciting, and I'm such a massive fan. And it was probably an 18-month to 2-year journey, and it was just sort of heartbreaking when it didn't happen. We really felt like it was going to happen. We were talking, really specific about, what, cast ideas, when they were trying to get into production, all these things. And then it just sort of dissolved. And so I think after that, it was very much like, I need to get back into making a movie to remind myself why this is a joyful thing. And it's not about 2 years of effort and then having, it all just go away.
Well, you were really methodical in the writing of it, where, I mean, like, they always say when you write low budget stuff, right, is limited locations, right in the locations you have access to. And you were very, you use those locations. You're like, I have access to, okay, we are talking right now, and you're at the house that the majority of Inheritance was filmed in.
I sure am. Yeah, I did. I based this around a house, that my mom lived in, that I knew I could have access to, that she had just purchased at the time, and So basically, yeah, that was the whole thing. I said, look, here's this amazing location. I know some great talented people. I know talented editors, DPs, actors, and we just put together a very low budget movie in a way that I was proud of. But, I think in retrospect that, I was almost too eager to rush into production. I think in retrospect that part of me wishes I had taken longer to develop the movie. But at the same time, there is a certain a leap of faith attitude you got to have sometimes where you're like, I need to do this now. If I don't do
Well,
this right now, it's going to be taken away from me and I won't be able to do it ever. And so
there's
you just
al- there's also the feeling that when you make a movie that like the endeavor itself you'll adjust and fix as it goes along. Like if there's a flaw, and that's the thing that like all these EPKs talking about the making of movies when there's like we have to have a perfect script. One, there's no such thing as a perfect script. Two, the making is what makes a script work. And like it's always
you make it three times. I do believe that mentality. If you make it three times, you make it when you write it, you make it when you shoot it, and then you make it the final time when you edit it. And there should always be discovery in every one of those things. If there isn't, you probably are fucking something up.
and that's got to be the thing you learned from Terry more than anything else, because like discovery is like his MO, and like that was the thing I noticed whenever. So all right, we're going into the section where our powers combined, our connections come together. Dun dun dun. I edited Inheritance, or actually, okay. Let's distinguish this. Two of the last three movies I edited, I taught or made a point to show the director Avid because I knew they were want to be very hands on with it, and you were one of them. So Inheritance is really a co-edited movie. You edited Inheritance too.
Yeah, we were very much side by side through a lot of that, and I loved that. And
Yeah.
I prefer to work that way. I mean, you definitely were the editor of the movie, but it was so nice to be able to, to go back and forth and have, to collaborate.
Yeah. Well, there was also, I had worked a lot, the indies I'd worked on. I was not, I was very unhappy with the schedule just because I kept pointing out, like, look, you're spending all this money on a movie and then shortchanging your post based on the model of 9 to 12 weeks of editing. And I know recently I was talking with a director about this, and the phrase we came to was like, you're just setting us up for a B minus. Like, it's just, and, but then I would point out, like, oh, I came from the Terrence Malick world, and they'd be like, oh, we're not going to have 5 years to make a movie. And I'd just be like, I'm not asking for that. I just want 2 or 3 more weeks. I just want to sit with this so that, like, maybe in the middle of night somewhere, we figure out the elliptical cut that's going to save this movie, or make
leaving room for discovery. That's leaving room for discovery to happen, right? Like that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and the thing is that Inheritance was a great middle ground because it was, I want to say it was cumulatively, it wasn't 6 months, was it? It was March to August. So that would in 5 months.
Yeah.
That was a good space.
That was a good space.
It was a long discovery process.
It was, for sure. And what's interesting is that we did end up coming back to some of the stuff that was correct originally, but with a different sort of mentality about how to put the whole together. And I remember when you were in Texas doing some of the test screenings, and like some of those discussions were really hard, and like that was brutal. I mean, it's hard to go through many edits of a movie, but I'm really happy with where we got with it, and I'm very proud of it.
Those are some of the questions I want to ask you about. What was your perception of those conversations?
Those conversations with you and me, or
okay, real briefly, I still use Inheritance as a model of like, we sat with a long assembly for a long time, and we kept showing it to people, and people were not responding well to it, and we knew we had good material, and we knew we had, just by the nature of it being long, like once we got into a time that we kind of thought the movie was eventually going to be, we can make something work within this framework. But just when we were showing it to people, they weren't digging it. And, I had been working in this indie world where we just gradually brought it down and everyone just kind of signed off on a certain point. And what had happened, the big lesson I came from this distinctly was we went into a screening that I thought was a complete waste of time. And we showed it to Dash's girlfriend, who now wife,
Right.
and I remember they were talking through the movie, and I just remember texting you while they were talking, like, this is not working. And we got through that screening, and they had only good things to say. And up until that point, we had been eliciting a lot of negative comments, which is how, to be fair, how I work is not necessarily the best bedside manner, if you will. Not the best. If editor as psychologist model means
Right.
I suck at my job, and I remember telling you all the positive things they said, and like both of us getting some energy off of it. And I was like, oh, they got it. They finally got it. And this may have been like, I don't know, 3/5 of the way through the process.
Totally. Past the halfway part.
And I just remember that next week was when we finally started cutting a bunch of sacred cows. And then we started showing it.
It's confidence, man. Once we started pulling that parking lot scene, we started pulling stuff out and feeling like, okay, right, that's the thing they like, pull that out. They like this, pull that out. And then we brought it down to 90 minutes or even 88 minutes, and it started to tumble and work.
But it was also, it was the confidence level that allowed us to bring some stuff back in. And there was a lot of stuff that was like, you have these negative screenings where you just shit on stuff that is not given it, the phrase from our former boss, Terry, did not have its day in court,
Yes. And things need to have their day in court. And you know what? And it's like, honestly, I think I used to feel resentful about this, but now I really don't. And I'm nothing but grateful anytime somebody gives me feedback, whether it's on a cut or a piece of writing or whatever it is like everybody's a fucking critic. Listen to what people don't listen to, the general. Because what it was too is that Texas screening was with some smart film people too. And when you have sometimes people that are very like keyed in and they have an idea about, their own ideas about films and their own ideas about how stories should be told. I've learned over the years to really listen to the criticism, but don't listen to the suggested solution.
Note behind the note.
Don't listen to the note. Listen to what it is that isn't working for them. There's something about this sequence they don't like. It doesn't mean there's solution to the sequence, because we ended up doubling down on some of the whole, Native American magic of it all and actually kind of going for it with some of that heavier logic. And because it's a genre movie, people did fill in some of the blanks, and it did start to work and sort of take flight after that screening you're talking about, because we started to trust it more. And I think that really perspective is everything, because of I didn't know Blinders, we didn't get a negative review out of the UK. We got 18 reviews. There was 2 of them that were mixed. The rest of them were positive. I absolutely could have never told you that was going to happen. You know what I mean? You don't know until you know. Even though we had done some small test screenings and friends and family screenings, you lose sight of something. Even if you were working on the fucking Godfather, you were fucking making The Exorcist, you're still like, I don't know, is this working?
One of the first movies we watched when we sat down was The Exorcist. I remember too, actually.
Yeah, of course. But dude, I think that was a good learning process for both of us in so many ways. And it taught me, I think that the thing, that it brought out that was really good is, again, back to the Terry example, is you have to have that determination internally to get through those things. If somebody's negative opinion or some critical comment is gonna tear it all down for you, then it's not gonna work out. Then you shouldn't be doing this. It's you have to be able to because I do remember feeling gutted by some of those early screenings, and then feeling very relieved when we got through the woods on all that stuff. So
what was the path to Inheritance to Blinders then?
I think with Blinders, really the biggest thing emotionally is I just wanted to have a little bit more fun. I think it was bring more comedy into it, I think, because I love dread. I love things that are dreadful and anxiety inducing. But I think with Blinders, the idea was, let's just kind of do something that's a little bit more playful. And so I think that was the goal, because I do have a relatively commercial leaning in terms of the stories that I gravitate towards. And I think with Inheritance, the reason that it was hard to market and it was hard to make much money off of it frankly, was because it was sort of an in-betweener. And it's a thin line between having something fresh and having something that falls between chairs. You know what I mean? Like you can
Mhm.
have something where it really lands for like look at how like much Get Out lands, right? It's a social commentary drama, but it's also a fucking thriller that's just fun. And so that could have landed as sort of an in-betweener. But I think what happened with Inheritance is critics were very nice to it. Critics really liked it. People that had a strong film IQ got the movie, because they had enough going into it, and then I think that for the genre audience that was really looking for more of a straight up haunted house movie and more of maybe a body count or something, it didn't work. And that, and that was, whatever, live and learn.
Well, I mean, I know I always made the argument that uh, there's this genre of intellectualized horror out right now, or
Yes,
psychological horror, where every horror has to be a metaphor for mental illness or something along those lines right now.
for sure. Yep.
Yeah. But with Blinders, so was it like, how long in between Inheritance and Blinders was there?
So I think Inheritance was, 2017 is when it was released. And so I think it was only about a year and a half. So I had a little period of time at my job where I knew that a new project was starting. I was basically, we hired somebody that was going to be sort of my new boss or one of my new bosses. And so I had this period in early summer that I could see coming about 6 or 7 months ahead of time. And so I just decided that we were very fortunate with Blinders. We put the whole thing together in less than a year, like from soup to nuts. Like I decided I had this idea that, oh my God, creepy rideshare driver. And I wanted to work with these two actors, Vince and Mike, that I love. And I've seen them do improvs together, and we'd done some sort of exercises together, in rehearsals. And so that was it. I think that it had probably been about a year and a half or 2 years since we'd shot, maybe 2.5 years since we'd shot Inheritance, but it only been about a year or so since.
Was Dash a co-writer on this?
Yeah, Dash is a co-writer and co-producer with me on Blinders.
How many scripts had you two written together in between this?
We've written a lot of scripts together at this point.
You're like, I don't have a number. I don't have a number.
I know. I'd say it's like 5 or 6 features and then maybe 3 pilots. So it's like, 10 or 12 things that we've written together over the years. And it's a lot. And we still write independently. I'm writing something right now, a horror, really kind of out and out, a haunted object horror film with my buddy Dave. His name's Dave Farino, and he's had shorts play at Fright Fest, Scream Fest, Sitges, all the great genre stuff. And so he's trying to develop a short of his that did really well at Scream Fest into a feature. And then Dash is also working with another writing partner on a pilot that he's doing. So it's fun because we're able to still collaborate together a lot, but also support each other. I just read his 52-page Bible for some new series he's trying to work on, which I wouldn't do that for everybody, but I'll gladly do it for him or you or people that I really care about. So
yeah, I didn't know how much I wanted to go into this because I haven't submitted anything to it, but like I feel like it's like me, you, AJ. I don't know who else is involved with this. Like, this is a good writing circle. We send each other our stuff to each other.
It is for sure. I mean, absolutely. I think that the three of us for sure, and I love having that. I mean, I think that it goes again back to like AFF community of writers. Writers are funny people. Like writers are odd people. I've been to a lot of WGA events, and it's funny. It's like, well, we have like these WGA mixers where they invite like writers and then like development people, and they just try to get them to mingle, and it's fucking hilarious because it's like there's a bunch of like awkward antisocial people that are jammed into like this, hey, we got you guys really nice catered food. Everybody dress up and put on your name tag and then awkwardly mill about this space trying to start a conversation, And so I think when you get your writer group, when it's those 3 or 4 people that you really do trust their feedback and you care about and you see eye to eye it enough to, whatever, like you cherish that. I cherish it so much.
So what was the editorial process like on Blinders? I kind of want to parallel with the screening process. What was the screening process like too?
The screening process with Blinders. Yeah. So that was funny. And it was funny you brought up Dash's girlfriend and wife's response to the first one, because there was a screening at her house with some of her friends and Dash's friends that didn't know about the movie that was very helpful. But with Blinders, the editorial thing, I brought on a composer named Devin Johnson, who was a guy I actually went to high school with. He worked for Hans Zimmer for 5 years, almost in the same way that I worked for Terry. He was very much, what he did is Hans would hand off projects to these sort of junior composers and say, you go record this for 3 days and then send me a bunch of stuff. And you go work on this sort of stuff, send me a bunch of stuff. So he kind of came up in the ranks under Hans and had he's a tremendously talented guy. I'm very happy with the score. And so
I've been listening to Hans Zimmer's masterclass. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I saw the yeah, I was thinking about taking that too. I sent it to Devin, told him, I was like, you've been through this, but here you go. Again.
Yeah, no, but he kind of, he has this great story about he always makes sure he wants to be helpful to people getting him coffee as long as they know to get him coffee, and then there's a certain point where he'll let them try something in. Like he describes one guy who worked with him on Pirates of the Caribbean, where he's like, the guy was like, I want to try something after everyone left home. He's like, oh, sure. And he came back the next day and they played it in front of everybody and like Bruckheimer and Gore Verbinski. And Hans Zimmer turned to the guy and was like, okay, you're never making me coffee again.
Nice. That's how he does it. I mean, I think that it's, you could look at it, you could be cynical in the way you look at it and be like, hey, he's getting all this, amazingly talented semi-free labor. But I think he really does, there's a lot to be said for mastery and, the way of people kind of coming up as juniors under a true master, and then him helping them build out their careers. I think it's a great system. I think he's awesome. But anyway, all that was to say is Devin introduced me to this guy, Jeremy Edwards, who ended up being our editor. And at the time, Jeremy had just come off of editing 2 episodes on season 1 of Rami for Hulu.
And, oh, shit.
Yeah, and he had worked with Joe Walker on 12 Years a Slave, and he was the assistant editor on 12 Years a Slave and the assistant editor on Arrival. And he was looking to basically get a first, a feature lead editor credit somewhere.
Those are the credits you told me about, where I was just like, well, shit, you're moving on up.
No, I mean, he was great. He was great because I also knew that, similar to like myself and to you, we'd all put in our hours as like hardworking people for other people. Right. It was like we'd already busted our asses really hard assisting other people, and now it was the first time. Devin mostly does, historically he's done a ton of video game work and a ton of advertising work, but this was his first first feature too. So it was just, I wanted to bring in people that, were willing to work at a pretty reasonable rate, obviously, and, but they would really want to have a dog in the fight and feel that this was more than a paycheck. And so it really grew organically. And it's so nice because Vince, the guy who is the star in Blinders, is now like amazingly close friends with Devin and Jeremy, the composer. Really? Yeah. Like they hang out more than I hang out with them now. I'm like, what the fuck? But it's great. So it did turn, it was like, I think that'll always be my hope, is that I can work with friends and people that I really, care about and enjoy their company. I think that's where that came from.
And that's the easiest way to have fun in the process too, also. So, exactly. So what it's going to show it at AFF. This is also one of the other big reasons is you're one of all our friends. There's a lot of our friends that have movies they had finished that were on the way of going to the festival circuit before COVID hit, much less after. You're one of the only people I know that not only got a movie on the circuit during COVID, but you got it on a pretty high profile festival. So how are you?
I'm really happy with AFF being the launch point. But I will say, in all reality, everybody should know, is like, out of 30 submissions to festivals, I think we got 25 rejections or 24. I mean, that's how this goes, right? We didn't get South by. We didn't get Sundance. We didn't get, Sitges, which I really wanted. There's plenty of things, but then of course Fantastic just shut down entirely. Fantasia, kind of accordion their slate. So there was a lot of changes on the festival side where I'm like, well, that's just out of my hands. I mean, if it is what it is. But but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that what we just did is we just took the path that we knew that we knew to take, and I thought that maybe with AFF there was going to be some cool networking we could do because I worked for Malick and Michael and Vince are from Austin and Antonio are cinematographers from San Antonio, and he went to UT. He didn't go to UT. Michael and Vince went to UT. But the point is, we had a lot of Texas connections, but none of that ended up mattering. Like they didn't, and they just accepted us because they liked the movie. And then I told them all this other stuff, which I had submitted as part of the original submission, and they hadn't even read any of that. They weren't even
That's been my experience with a lot of this South by and a little bit of Austin Film Festival is having been there for so long, you assume there's some local province, and it turns out that's not the case at all. So like
exactly, I was surprised.
Totally a merit-based admission into the festival. But how much before you got into AFF, how much were you trying to figure out a change in the formula? Like that's the thing that scares me right now. It's like and I'm talking about in terms not even making movies, but getting jobs on the indies that I was getting jobs on before this, where it's like I'm worried that the festival circuit is dead now.
I think it's rewritten. I think it's going to be a revised thing. And also just like, people are learning about remote work these days, people are never going to go back to the office the same way they did before COVID, and I think that there's just going to be a post-COVID, reality where maybe it's, certain festivals go away, certain festivals are, reduced in scope, whatever it is. But what I will say was what was big for Blinders, and what I was surprised by pleasantly is Fright Fest was a huge launch pad for us. And we actually, the thing that was the biggest difference between Inheritance and Blinders is we got hit up by distributors, sales agents, and plenty of other people started coming out of the woodwork right after the Fright Fest thing was announced. So that didn't happen with Inheritance. With Inheritance, we had to chase, opportunities a little bit more. Whereas this is like, we have several offers like on the table right now, and we're trying to figure out which one we're going to do. And I think the movie's going to get picked up. And so, I'm sort of confused by that because because it goes against a lot of the logic that I've had in my head for like 7 or 8 years about how these things come together. You know what I mean? Like I thought I needed like the distributors we're talking to, they think it's great we're playing at AFF, but that doesn't really have any impact on whether or not they're going to make an offer on the movie. Like they're just like, oh, okay, we like this movie. So it's interesting. It's not
this goes to my next question. Per your earlier point about if the studios or the mid-budgets or even the indies lose their opportunities, we're in a thriving time with the streamers. Like, is there a pathway where the festivals go straight to the streamers now? Because I mean, Sundance had been going in that direction for a long time.
Totally.
And I mean, as much as I want to doom and gloom the festivals, like we're going to get back into a giant room and watch movies again, one way or another. That's going to.
I know I am. I 100% have to do that again. So yeah, I agree with you. We can't lose the theaters, but I think you make a really good point. Like what I noticed this year, right, is like on Netflix, you saw they have like a new section that's like Sundance highlights, right? Where maybe there is more direct collaboration between New York Film Festival and Criterion or Hulu or whatever, like all these different platforms out there. And I'm sure we're going to see more and more of that because really the money is all there on the streamer side, right? So it's like, I think that's what's upending the system is that, we now are in a subscription model world where the whole previous kind of box office model is being upended a little bit. Like Netflix might find it totally worthwhile to spend $45 million on some movie because it gives them a little more prestige this year. They look at the data and they're like, oh my God, we're not making much money on this movie at all. But it's rounding out our slate and we make more money than God, so we can afford to throw that into the mix with everything else.
We can put money into a library title and then have Criterion release a physical copy of it. And as soon as Criterion puts their imprimatur on that, then suddenly our library titles now vaulted into prestige.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That was, I mean, did you have anything else? I was kind of curious. I want I kind of want to ask you if you've had anything interesting you watched this year, but no one's watching anything interesting this year. It's like Bill and Ted was great. Tenet was disappointing.
Bill and Ted was great. But I'm just staring at, I don't know. These days, it's like the world itself is too much of a train wreck to tear your eyes away. Heidi and I have been watching a lot of West Wing because I have some like deep-seated fantasy need.
That can't be good. That cannot be good for you.
No, it's not. It's probably masochistic, but it's like, do you remember? I don't even remember, but it's like, wouldn't it be amazing if competent, moral people were doing things right now? That would be awesome.
Even just a basic like, do you remember the shit we thought was important in the late 90s?
Right, exactly. Like everything is just, it's a stress reducer, honestly, in a weird way. But no, I don't know. I don't know. I think I just here one thing I'll say. I just watched Ben Wheatley's The Sightseers on Criterion over the weekend.
Nice, very nice.
And, that was fun. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that watch a lot. Right up my alley.
Well, cool, man. So Tyler Savage, I want to thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Shane. This was a blast.
Yeah.
I love it.
Love you. Miss you, man. Glad for you having me on.
Brother. Yep. Thank you, sir. And keep me posted, and we'll keep in touch. We'll talk soon. Stay safe out there.